Ashoka by Dr. DR Bhandarkar. It appears that Ashoka was in the habit of celebrating the anniversary of his coronation by the release of prisoners. This is inferable from what he says at the end of Pillar Edict V. During the period that has elapsed until I had been anointed, 26 years, says he there, 25 jail deliveries have been effected, as prisoners were released 25 times in the space of 26 years. It means that the 26th year of his reign and had not elapsed, but was going on when the Pillar Edict was promulgated. It thus shows that the dates were, which he specifies for the incidents of his life, are current, regnal years and not expired, as he has been taken by scholars. Kautilya in his Arthashastra lays down that the king shall prohibit the castration and destruction of animal foetus on certain days. Among these, he includes the day of the nakshatra of the king and the country. In Pillar Edict V, Ashoka speaks of castration and branding of animals and specifies on what days he has prohibited them. Curiously enough, most of these days agree with the those mentioned by Kautilya, and what is noteworthy is that here he specifies only two nakshatra days, namely Tishya and Punarvasu. One of these is most probably the nakshatra of the king and the other of the country, and the question must arise which nakshatra is of the king and which of the country. It is worthy of note that the Tishya nakshatra has been um, mentioned also in the two separate edicts of Dholi and Jogda. These edicts we know were intended by Ashoka solely for the exhortation and guidance of the officials of the newly conquered province of Kaling, and he issues the order that they shall be recited every Trishya day for their benefit. Evidently, of the two nakshatras, great importance has thus been assigned to Tishya and to Punarvasan. This may be seen also from the fact that although in the usual list of nakshatras, Tishya comes after Punarvasan, it is believed prior to the latter, not once but twice in Pillar Edict V. It is difficult to avoid the conclusion that as so much importance has been given to Tishya, that much must be the nakshatra of the king. If this inference is correct, Punar Vasu becomes the nakshatra of the country, by which we suppose we have to understand the country of Magadha. The addicts of Ashoka are concerned with his dhamma, the means he adopted to disseminate it. They naturally, therefore, throw a flood of light on his life and career after he became a Buddhist. But let us here try and see what little these records tell us about his earlier life, both in his private and public capacity. We have already seen that he had several brothers and sisters living till the 13th year of his reign, and that they were residing not only in Patliputra but also in the Faisal towns. Of course, Ashoka has had his Avarodhana or closed female apartments. How many queens he actually had, we do not know. But he had at least two, for there is a reference to his second queen in one of his inscriptions. And the very fact that she had been designated second queen show that the relative ranks of the queens have had in the day been fixed. The name of the second queen was Karuvaki, and his son from her one was Taivera. The object of the inscription is to ensure um, for this queen the merit of any donation she might be pleased to make. In Pillar Edict 7th, Ashoka speaks of his having commissioned some of his officers to induce the members of his royal household to make gifts and to see to their proper organization. It is interesting to note what members of his family he mentions in his connection. Of course, he first speaks of himself and his queen, but immediately after his queens, he makes reference to his Avarodham and tells us what its inmates were, living not only at his capital but also in the provinces. Anybody who reads the passage carefully cannot but think that in his question, his queens were not the only members of his Avrodhana, who could then be the other members. They cannot be the wives of his male relatives. For they cannot with propriety be called his Avrodhana. Were they his left-handed wives? His Avrodhana would thus comprise not only the queens but also other Parda ladies of lower status. This no doubt reminds us of Sinhalese tradition, that when Ashoka during his father's lifetime was viceroy of at Ujjain, he formed connection with the lady of the Sethi caste who resides at Vedisagiri, base Nagar near Bhilsa, and continued to reside there even when Ashoka seized the throne and his children from her accompanied him to his capital. This legend clearly confirms the interference deducible from the pillar edict that Ashoka had women other than queens, and that his Avarodhana was not all in Patliputra, but some of its members stayed in the Mufassal. In the same pillar edit and in continuation of the same subject, namely the distribution of the charities of the royal household, Ashoka speaks of his own sons and other development. Devi Kumaras, the sons of Ashoka, are thus distinguished from the latter. Who could the other Devi Kumaras be? Most probably, Ashoka is here referring to the sons not of his own Devis or queens, but the queens of his father and consequently to his non co-uterine brothers. How many sons Ashoka had, we do not know, but he must have had at least four sons. In ancient times, it was customary for a king to appoint his sons so far as possible as viceroy of the outlying provinces, and four such princes we find mentioned in his epigraphic records uh, as being in charge of the four viceroyalties of uh, Takshashila, Ujjaini, Suvarnagiri, and Tosali. To what provinces these viceroyalties corresponded, we will see in the next chapter. But what we have there here to notice is that Ashoka had at least four sons. To sum up, Ashoka had a very large family. He had several brothers and sisters staying not only at Patliputra but also outside in the empire. Some of them were certainly his co-uterine brothers, but there were also some sprung, no doubt, from his father, but by different mothers. Ashoka had also his avrodhan or close female apartments, not only in his capital but also in the provinces. They were occupied not only by his queens but also other women with whom he had connection. He had at least two queens, one of whom was named Karuaki, and at least four sons. But whether Tivara sons of Karuaki was one of them, it is not possible to determine. We know very little of Ashoka's private life. His records shed very little light upon it. There is, however, one passage in Rock Edict 6, which is interesting. This edict describes how often and at what different places he dispatched the business of his people. Here he tells us that he has arranged to dispose of at all places and at all times so that no king prior to him even did it. Naturally, therefore, he specifies the places where he formerly filed away his time, but where now he attended to their affairs. This, therefore, I have done, says he's namely that at all hours and in all places, whether I'm eating or I'm in close to female apartments in a inner chamber, Garbhagra in the Muse, Vraja and Courts back, Vinita or in pleasures, orchards, the reporters may report people's business to me. Evidently, therefore, when Ashoka had no business to dispose of, and of course, he was not asleep. He was to be found at his capital, either regaling in the dining hall, engaged with the inmates of his harem, chatting in his retiring cabin, or inspecting the royal stood, enjoying a horse ride, or beguiling his time in the orchards. What special tasks, tastes, and fascinations we had developed or evinced in these matters, we do not know. But we do know what articles of food gratified his palate. Even when he was rigorously carrying out his program of stopping the slaughter and injury to living beings, he made certain reservations in regard to his royal table. But even now, when this document of Dhamma was written, says he in rock edicts, only three animals were killed for curry, namely two peacocks and only one deer. But even that deer, not regularly. Even these animals will not afterward be killed. Ashoka here admits that although he has stopped the butchering of all other animals, he has allowed the killing of peacocks and deer to serve his meat. Evidently, he was fond of flesh of these animals, and as he says that the animal that he was regularly butchered for this table was not the deer but the peacock, it appears that he was inordinately fond of peafowl. In this connection, it is worth noting that Buddha Ghosh says in his commentary to the Samyutta Nikaya to the people of the frontier provinces are delicious, but they are abominable to those of the middle country. To the latter, the flesh of the peafowl is delicious. It is, however, abominable to others. It is therefore no wonder if Ashoka, who was a native of the middle country, could not for a long time give up the eating of the peafowl flesh. We need not, however, harbor any doubt as to his having ultimately eschewed it. Promised in his edict and thus turned a staunch vegetarian. Another inscription, Ashoka gives us another glimpse into his private life. Rock Edict 8th informs us that for a long time past kings were See, but crowds of women surround him, and outside of the circle, spearmen are arranged. The road is marked off with ropes, and it is death for man and woman alike to pass within the ropes. Men with the drums and gongs led the procession. The king hunts in the enclosures and shoots arrows from a platform. At his side stand two or three armed women. If he hunts in the open grounds, he shoots from the back of an elephant. Of the women, some are in chariots, some on horses, and some even on elephants. And they are equipped with weapons of every kind as if they were going on a campaign. The Shakuntala also, no doubt, describes the chase of Dushyant as something like an expedition and even represents the king as being attended by Yavana women. With the bows in hand, one can very well imagine Ashoka as a reveling in such a sport in the earlier part of his life. His contemporary or previous kings, but the sanctity of animals' life, which made an ineligible impression on his mind afterwards, made his soul recoil from such enjoyment, and he gave up all sports and diversion which involved any kind of brutality or butchery to life. We shall now try to see what Ashoka was like in his capacity as king before he became a staunch missionary of Buddhism. Very little about him in his capacity is known. Um, what little we know is from Rock Addict 1. From it is appeared that, like all other kings, Ashoka was in the habit of feasting and amusing his subjects, probably a diplomatic move to keep these people pleased and satisfied. One mode of public entertainment that he practiced was the celebration of the Samaj. Samaj was two kinds. In one, the people were treated to dainty dishes in which meat played the most important part. In the other way, they were treated to dancing, music, wrestling, and other performances. The former was obviously a convivial melee. The latter was intended for the amusement of the people, and in this sense, Samaj was synonymous since the Ranja Prikshigara, that is the amphitheater, and sometimes denoted the concourse of the people assembled there. All the instances of the Samaj described in the Brahmanical and the Buddhist literature show that they were intended to feast the palate or the eye and the ear of the people. There can be no doubt that the ancient kings of India were in the habit of holding samajas. Thus, in the Hathi Gumpa inscription at Katak, we are told that Karavela, king of Kaling, amused his capital town by celebrating utsavas and samajas. Precisely the same thing is reported in a Nasik cave in inscription to have been done by the Gautam Putra. Satakarni, a king of Deccan, and in fact Kautilya himself lays down that a king shall imitate the people's attachments to the Samaj Utsav and Vihara of their country or divinity. Both the kinds of the Samajas seem to have were celebrated by Ashoka, but when he began to preach Dhamma, he naturally tabooed those where animals were slain to serve meat, as we may enter from rock edicts first. As there was notching in the other samajas for him to object to, he retained them but slightly changed the character of the exhibition of the public spectacles. He no doubt must have provided such spectacles as he would not only cause amusements to his subjects but also generate, develop, and disseminate dhamma amongst them. What these scenes we will see in the future chapter. Reasons of state may also have dictated his taking another step in the same direction in the same record. Ashoka tells us that the slaughter of Hindus of hundreds of thousands animals were daily going on in the royal kitchens before the edict was promulgated. The case is precisely like the narrated in the Vanapravan or of the Mahabharata, where we were informed that 2,000 cattle and 2,000 kine were slain every day in the kitchen of king called Ranti Deva, and that of the dwelling out means to his people. He attained to incomparable fame, and in fact, the practice of daily doing out food to hundreds of people.